The committee order. All council members are present. Who's
Debbie is on.
Hello.
Hey, Debbie. Online. Hey, thank you. So our first item of business, the Doug scenario.
Okay, I'm going to start off with this should be the last time you see me in relation to this data upgrade.
Don't ever say that.
Yeah, I know you don't understand. Been saying that I've been waiting.
I thought you said that.
Coming back with more of these things.
No, this is the last one. This back in May of last year, you actually gave we gave a notice of award to the contractor Source Electric for to do the upgrades, to actually do the physical upgrades. It's at Lift Station 7, which is our last lift station to get the PLC upgrades, and then we're adding a pressure transducer at Lift Station 21 that the operations department felt that would be what's currently there for measuring level in one of the tanks. And then we're moving the MTU from the old site, the old public works site, to our new site. And when we're doing that, that's all going to also change the configuration of where the radios are communicating as far as that goes. Because most of our lift stations communicate via radio and the antenna. Some communicate via Verizon, but most of them do that. So in part of all that, we also need parametrics support for doing all the SCADA changing, at the main computer. RH2 is under contract under their existing contract for doing the programming of the PLCs at the offsites, which is like Lift Station 7. Parametrics does the main computer programming. So they're going to do all that. It requires some changing. We adding some how everything talks a little bit, and so we asked them for their do all that. They gave us the quote of the $71,800, which is actually close to what I anticipated. I bring all this up is because, as you see, there is a negative number at the end of the day. That negative number is really not, my eyes are not a negative number, because what happened was when we gave Source Electric the notice of award for their contract back in May, that contract was for $188,933. I anticipated that they were going to spend some of that money before, even though that most of the work wasn't going to happen until 2023. I anticipated that we were going to get an invoice for the building of some of the panels, the MTU panel, and the new panel for Lift Station 7. They didn't do that because everything got delayed for parts, so they didn't get billed by their sub, so they didn't bill us, invoice us. So the whole $188,000 $933 that we awarded last year got hit up. I've almost used that bad word. The contract amount is still 100% in 2023.
Did you use any place else?
And so what I didn't do is I didn't reallocate the full amount of $188,933 into 2023. I did a lesser amount because I anticipated there would be about $75,000. Exactly what I calculated, but it's 71, so it would have been about $75,000 I anticipated would have been spent in 2022. Never happened. this is why I say it's not really a negative number, because it was money that we already knew that we were going to be spending then, and then the money that we were going to need to spend for parametric support in 2023. You know, so that Sherry's aware of this, and I guess I asked her if this would just fall under a budget amendment at the end of the make the numbers whole again.
So when you write that up there, though, the current balance thing is going to.
Well, I have to write what our budget shows. I can't.
Budget is at 50. Yeah, right. That's pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
Then the current balance is already negative 32.
Right, because remember that contract that I just said, the $188,933. What didn't get spent in that contract? We're still gets encumbered into 2023. So the whole amount of the water side of that contract.
We're cash. We're not. We're cash business.
Well, I can't.
Our accountant.
Revenue is cash.
Well,
So there's no encumbering a previous.
well, what do I do? Say your
No, I
contract
don't
is
know.
void?
I don't know.
No, we've never done that in the whole time that
I'm just for
we've
budget
been
for
around.
the write-up here, for the write-up thing.
I can't.
Hard to explain, especially when he goes to the.
So, I mean, so there was 17,000 of that 188,933. I'm gonna use the water because you brought up the 50,000.
Uh-huh.
So the 17th, there was 17,000 of that was plus from the original source contract of the 183 that was for water, because none of that got spent. It all got it still got encumbered when we take our contracts that are still active
Yeah, sure.
from one year to the next year. We still have to account for that money, you know. So that goes into what we call the encumbered. You have your budget, you have what's encumbered and what's spent.
Well,
Right?
That's so well. Yeah, there's a nuance in the language. I think Craig could probably help me. I'm wading in too deep of the pool. You know, we don't. Again, we are cash, so we don't encumber anything. So
Well, we automatically carry over active contracts.
sure, yeah.
The money,
But as
the
long
money
as-
to pay for those contracts is cash amount, but we don't.
Well, yeah, we should have. If they didn't spend it and it was budgeted like in 2022, you were expecting expenditure in 2022 and it didn't. You had to take that money, move it into 2023.
And so
And
that's
that's what
where
we didn't
that's
do.
where that's where Sherry says to me, how much money are you going to need in 2023?
Yeah.
So I anticipate back in September how much money that may be 2023 of that contract, how much of that's going to get spent in 2022, how much of did get spent in 2022. Did I say that twice? In 2023. And if I'm if I'm off, then that's what you may see, which is exactly this, because none of it got spent in 2022. I estimated in September of last year that some of it would get, and none of it did.
I just start with the current balance is negative. That's what I understand.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
That's
how you
that,
could be
that's
a
the big
starter.
thing. You move the money across. You
That's
got
the,
50,000. You say, okay, we got negative 32. Where do you spend the rest of that at?
what's that?
Well, it says budget's 50 for the first line, 50,000. Current balance is negative 32.
That's
That means
I don't know how to explain it. That's the encumbered. That's money actually not spent, but we're contracted to spend it.
Sure,
How does that
yeah.
say?
Yeah.
Because that's that active contract we have with Source Electric to do the work,
Right.
not parametrics,
Right.
Source Electric. So we haven't physically spent it, but we have a contract to spend it.
So when you get done with all this, how much money we left in that account? Nothing? You move this across to help offset the cost.
Negative 63,532.
Yeah,
Well, is that what it is?
yeah.
I understand.
Doug, I believe those amounts there, though, that you show
Yes.
under the budget balance, those negative values. When you were talking with Sherry about this, I believe she said that would be accounted for in a budget amendment at the mid-biennium.
That's what I suggested, and because that's typically how we've done this in the past, when we have a contract that gets carried over into the year that doesn't, when we did this correctly, when I didn't do it correctly, then it gets in a budget amendment. So that she
So did Sherry say when we get done with this, we'll come out even or still negative? Do you have any idea? Did you flush the two together?
So so the funding source for these projects is sewer SDCs.
Our
SDCs in total water and sewer. So the monies to fund those are there. However, they were not allocated specifically for that unspent portion of his project in this year, which I believe, if I'm following you, is the difference that's shown here, correct?
difference is being the funding for these projects hasn't changed.
Mhm.
Problem is we work on a biennium, and each year, as you said, we're a cash only. So if I don't move the money from one year to the next year, then it makes our cash look show negative, even though the funding for the overall project, or the for all the years, it remains the same. Hasn't changed. I'm not. If you were to say, if I was to say, if you gave me $100,000 in 2020, and at the end of the day in 2023, I would still would only have spent $100,000. That makes sense.
Makes sense.
It's just that I'm not, because you're asked, because of how we work, I have to show, and finances wants to show that each year is what we allocate for each year is a certain amount, and as a cash only system, I don't know,
Could we table this for a moment and move on with the agenda? I'll contact Sherry and see if she could.
That'd be
choose us.
possible.
What do you think?
Oh, is she
Yeah.
on interviews?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What's your timetable?
I mean, if you want to take it to 2 weeks from now, or
Just go to a workshop with it, I guess.
Yeah, I'm thinking we need a little bit better explanation here.
yeah, I thought,
At least that's what I'm feeling
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So I
So-
think
I mean,
What happens, because my question will be is what happens if I don't vote for this?
Always.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
I know that's going to be.
I mean, I know.
and
I'm
and-
in February, right? I mean, you're asking me to spend money I don't have
Yeah.
on the face of it, right? And then I look at it and I go, well, I only really have to spend $15,000 for the lift station 7, right? I mean, so I can get away with only going in debt $15,000.
Yeah, I think the better thing to do probably.
I mean, I have to show,
Question asked
the
Mike.
numbers I put in here is what our Eden account system shows. I can't,
No, yeah, it makes
that's why it
sense.
shows.
Yeah,
that's right.
I know.
And
Just
so,
from the
and-
person outside, that's the hard part. Is you're right with what you're doing, but from our perspective and when the public looks at it, not in language that this level understands. It's kind of like you have to figure out. Well, if I didn't know anything about this, walking in the door, what would it look like? Okay, that's
Can he add
So
a summary?
my suggestion then would be, is just push it back to the next CDC.
Oh, if you can wait that
And-
long, it's fine. I
well,
don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that would be best. And that way we can be better prepared.
I don't know if the numbers will change, the wording, I can change the wording as we get more information
I'm sure
from
Sherry will.
Sherry, yeah.
Joe, we're kind of doing
Sherry will let you-
Or you
So-
can move it to,
March 7th.
you can move it to a finance committee, finance committee as
March
well.
7th, CDC. Work for you?
Finance doesn't apparently know.
I do not
Those
see,
people over there.
I do not see parametrics having to do this before a March 14th, you know, because that would be that, then it would go to council if it got approved. So, I don't,
Thank you.
if I don't have it tomorrow, it's, all hell's, my lift, our lift stations aren't gonna stop
We'll get
running.
taken care of.
It's still sick.
I thought they pushed. They didn't get stuff.
Cool. No, it's a lift. It's a lift. There is a lift.
They
station.
So they do
Push.
suck.
They
Yeah,
suck
they
over there
suck
on.
first.
Depends which side you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Are you upstream or downstream?
I'm
So to
definitely
just
down.
move this forward, we'll table
I'm
for
definitely
now,
down.
and
I know I
this will be
push.
on the CDC agenda for March
Wow, they
7th.
sucked one up the hill there.
Sounds like something I hear on English British
Moving
TV.
along, Doug.
So we will move along to resolution 3130, Parks, Trails, Open Space.
So we did with the council on October 11th to get a contract with Conservation Tech to prepare a new parks, trails, and open space plan. In a cost-saving move at the time, we also applied for a grant to cover some of the work that we would have put into the contract initially. Because the contract, the grant award was supposed to occur in early December. We got notified in November that they were actually going to push it out till January. We actually found out in February that we did not get the RCO grant that would have covered the work that we would have included in the original contract. So we're bringing forth an amendment to add that work to their current contract. I hope I explained the budget correctly. There's $290,000-ish in the budget, which is equal to the amount of the current contract. This would be an additional $69,000-ish. I did check with Sherry, the park CIP, which is what would pay for this, has over $800,000 in ending fund balance, assuming all of the expenditures in 23 and 24. So everything that was in the budget that would come out, there would still be $100,000 left to cover this work. And then what we would do is we bring a biannual amendment at the end of the year to adjust the budget amounts to make sure the budget's all correct. Right? Coordinated that with Sherry, and then we also have that in the resolution, both authorizing the mayor to sign the contract and also to bring forward the mid-biennium budget amendment to cover the costs. And as I said, it would come out of the $800,000 ending fund balance after all projects were expended. So it wouldn't impact any of the projects that we have currently in the budget for the next 2 years.
So I wanted to ask, so there's a public participation thing in here, right? Do we already have
Doing
money in there for, because I would rather spend that on I would rather spend all that public participation money on putting a advisory vote on the bill, right? Because we'll get better participation that way. We'll pretty much get, you look at the last returns, right? They get really good turnout typically in Bonney Lake.
And as I said, I think the challenge between an advisory vote and a survey, they're after two different things. An advisory vote is a yes/no question.
Sure.
This is going to be a series of 8 to 10 questions on different topics.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing two different things.
Right, but on one, we'll get really clear feedback from probably a majority, more than likely, of citizens in Bonney Lake. Where the other one, we're going to get a few interested parties. Right?
Well,
I
So,
think though data-wise, you're not going to get the granularity that the study requires. You know what I mean?
yeah, but the granularity I'm looking for is, do people in Bonney Lake want me to tax them to build a park? Yes or no? That's the real question, because we can't build parks without taxing somebody. We're either gonna do a B&O tax and tax businesses, or we're gonna do a bond and tax homeowners. And I wanna know if homeowners wanna pay for that tax.
And I would,
I'm wondering though, don't you think that before they can answer whether they want to be taxed or not, they want to know what it is they'd be paying for?
Sure, you could come up with a couple of straw men to say, hey, you could pay for this or this. Now we know we're trying to build a park at Midtown, right?
Yeah.
That's the big deal. I mean, to me, it's not rocket science for us to create a sketch, right? Not a schematic, but a sketch that says, hey, here's what you would get for $30 million, right?
but the
There's
challenge,
already multiple of this sketches
Yeah.
available too.
yeah,
What?
There's already
So,
multiples
I
already.
think the challenge,
Nice ones.
well, the challenge is there's never been anyone that's been adopted and said, this is what it is, right? And I think that's the plan. And the problem, and I think the second part of this is what we're after with the survey is, what do you want in those parks, right? The assumptions that we're working off of for everything right now is a survey that was done over 30 years ago.
Mhm.
And that's what's driving the 30 or $40 million cost.
Mhm.
So what this is after is to identify what do people want in the parks, and also how do we want to deal with Allen York Park. And so this is a targeted, supposed to try to get to a statistically level 30% survey of what do people want in the park. There's a series of 8 to 10 questions ranging from what do you want to see in the parks, what improvements you want to see in the parks. And I think that I don't disagree that having an advisory vote at some point is a good ideal, but I think that would be after we can tell them what it is, one, how much it's going to be, two, and what we're going to build. So I think right now an advisory vote would be premature in the sense that you don't have a cost and you don't have what it is. And so
I think they'd all say no. If you go up and say, okay, we're gonna spend $50 million, do we tax you for the new parks, Allen York Park, Midtown? I would say no, I don't wanna vote for that, I don't know what you're gonna do. And now if we go up and advisory vote, because they came back with this, and this, what we're gonna do, parks, which makes sense.
yeah, I would say the time to do the advisory vote would be next year as part of the 2024 general election, because you're going to have one of your highest returns.
That's when I would do it. I wouldn't do it before then because I want that 70% voter turnout.
Right.
Because I really am about trying to understand, right? And so that's why I wanted to bring this up and say, where are we at? Because I don't think we're going to have money to build a park. I think we're going to have to pay. And I want to know. I want to give the citizens a chance to say, no, don't tax me. Go tax Costco. Right?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think it's just giving the citizens an amount. We need X amount of money to build these parks which have been adopted. So the way it would lay out is we would do all this work by the end of the year.
Yeah.
That way we can tell you what the total cost is, what the improvements are, all those questions, and have all those answers, and also know from the surveys what people wanted in parks.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2024, you do the advisory vote with either, hey, do you want us to implement a B&O tax to fund it? However we ask that question. But then we know how much we need, what we need, and what we're building. So I don't disagree with the advisory vote. I just think this is the initial step in order to get to that in 2024.
Yeah, so I just don't want to get to 2024 and be told, well, it's going to cost me $30,000. Where are you going to get it, right?
For the advisory vote?
Yeah. Because I have half of that here.
But I don't,
Right.
but see,
Right, I have half of it right here. If I go, no, just change this so that there's no public participation, take that $15,000, earmark it, or whatever, however we call it, encumber it for an advisory vote.
This is Parks Capital Improvement Fund money.
I don't think
Well, that's a good reason not to do this.
Right.
yeah,
So
this,
what money could be used?
We have a non-departmental fund that we use.
Okay, all right. And I mean, I just wanted to bring it up for discussion because this is the only time I get to discuss it with them.
I understand exactly, but since we have the money for that, we could do the other money next to the advisory vote. And the two will work together well to see really what they want. Because at this point, I'm assuming what they want around, I could be full of it too. They don't want to do that at all. We'll see.
Probably not. You're probably one of the.
Probably don't want a single sidewalk.
Yeah, right. No, because all of the sports are made, it's great effort. But I'm very good what it needs. But it's been done. Unfortunately. And we keep like not doing them. Okay, so no, I'm not done. And I don't mind if you guys do your thing or whatever you do. But I'm just like, I'm kind of done. I've like been there, done that 14 times. Doesn't anything.
Well, I would
We
say-
don't have a funding option, a funding alternative. The council, a really nice funding pack. Council, just, no, they
I would say that this
is, and to me, I'm the elected official, right? That has knocked on a billion doors. I know what the people want. I'm an elected official, and I'm not going to pay somebody to go around and ask people what they want.
I think there's two things to consider. I don't disagree with the feeling jaded by past plans. I think I
You know how that goes.
yeah,
right?
no, and I think that there's three things to consider with that. I will say the first one, unfortunately, when we did the Allen York plan, it was done in a vacuum. Unfortunately, Gary really didn't go out and pull in the engineers, pull in the planners. It was kind of the park commission and Gary that came up with that plan. I wasn't even part of it. And so I think that created a challenge. I think we haven't ever had a comprehensive look. The last time we did a comprehensive,
Just like put a fence up.
well, I would
How
think,
hard is that?
I think the last time we had a comprehensive look at how the park system works was in 2008. And I think the other thing that the data sets up, which we unfortunately can't just bring in your knowledge in, is for grant applications. What the data,
That's exactly it.
what the data allows us to do is to use that information to apply for grants to find alternative funding sources. So while I don't disagree that you have lots of data, the problem is in order to substantiate that and apply for grants and make our grant
Gotta be
applications
documented.
better, we have to document it. And so,
Not documented, doesn't exist.
exactly. And so I don't disagree with any of your points, and I'm hoping that over the next couple of years, you'll see that this plan, what we're trying to do with this one differently than the ones in the past, is actually make it implementable. So it's not a 1,000-year plan, that we have an understanding of the cost, the impacts, the data that we need to support grants. I don't disagree with those critiques of long-range planning documents, and I'm trying to not do that.
No, you're great. You
But-
do excellent work in it. Appreciate all your work. Perfect. Done. No.
Look, I would just sell the property,
On the WSU.
Yeah, you can
But
sell the
I want to build the park out
Well,
there.
so
You
do I,
have
but
a
that's
plan,
what's
there's
gonna
already
happen if we
a plan
don't
there.
figure out something eventually, that
But-
change.
Yeah, you need all that like documentation. Not gonna get, you don't have the money, so how do you get the money? You gotta have all.
So we can't take one of our previous plans and say, this is what we're doing.
There was a sketch done for Midtown Park that was done in isolation without any public involvement, so that wouldn't be able to support a grant. What Midtown Park has, or Allen York Pack has had laid out is not what we want to do anymore, because, so that plan would not be worked. And then the last time we had a comprehensive parks plan was in 2008, and so it's almost 2 decades old.
Didn't that one have public participation in it?
Yeah, but it's 2 decades old. They're not going to accept it. As I'm saying, we have not done this in over 2 decades, which is why we're doing it now. We've done the piecemealing approach, and when you do the piecemealing approach, that's why you get nothing happening, because there isn't a single unifying plan that's marching us forward.
For
with-
grants, for grants.
Well, and also,
But is
for-
it a good enough plan to take to the people and say, this is what we would do?
Well, we've had those up at Allen York Park. We had Lion Lake Days. We had those plans all posted down.
No,
there.
I
We
know.
were getting feedback from them then. I
Yeah.
mean, we've done this already.
Which one was that?
for Allen York Park,
All, you know,
It was just Allenmore Park.
recall
We've
what
kinda
plan that we're asking everybody stuff.
Yeah,
like
the Midtown one was, the former mayor had like a steering committee that came up with a one-page. Right, and so the challenge that we're trying to do is we're trying to there's three things that are gonna be the outcome of this plan. One, the capital project list isn't gonna be, here's everything you have to do. It's actually gonna be prioritized with, this is how you move through each year, implement this project.
And how did Justin get to this point at $53 million? Was just a sketch.
What he did was in the comprehensive plan, there is a community, ball field costs X dollars. The survey from 25 years ago said we needed 10 ball fields. 10 ball fields times that general number equals X. That's what I'm saying.
And he also looked at some.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, he walked through all.
So there's no,
Something.
yeah, there hasn't been a comprehensive look to say exactly what the number.
Well,
I'm just gonna
if
end up
you
voting no
do this, I
again.
would love to include a facility for the seniors and for the young adults.
That's
really important to me.
that part, that's already kind of baked into the
Okay.
current plan that we're
You
working
know,
on.
what we have there, and then the kids are someplace to go, so.
Yeah, so, and that's hopefully the stuff that'll come out of the steering committee of where you want a community center. Do you want to move the senior center? There's a senior rep on there, and then the public engagement piece.
First Riley has it. It's beautiful. Nice up there.
Mercer Island.
Mercer Island. I researched that one time ago.
Maybe we could not call it Midtown, but we call it Mercer.
I do think an example.
Get in there, annex it, it's available.
Get that done, favor, right?
That's right.
I'm making
They
some
might-
signs
we
for
could-
guy up there, Mill.
We could doorbell up there, say money for the Mercer Island Advent Park.
So we're gonna do this or what?
I'm where Dan's at. I'm like, I want to move forward, but I'm struggling with me, the public participation part doesn't pass the giggle test because I don't think we're going to find anything out that we don't already know, right? I mean, that's the thing. If we're investing real money, I mean, more than $10,000 real money. But I mean, if you really think it's going to add value, think that this time next year we're ready to go with an advisory vote to say, hey, folks, here are our options. You know, how do we raise the money? Do we tax you directly, or do we tax you indirectly? Because those are our only two options, right?
I think it has that value in the sense that when we roll out those advisory votes, we can document everything that we've done with the public to come up with the plan that we have, right? That's one. And then two, as we roll this out to other granting organizations, we can document what we did. And one of the big components of granting when it comes to these types of grants for Parks and Rec are really documenting how you engage with the public to get to the conclusions that you're. So I don't disagree. I think in our brains, we all have an ideal of what it should be. The challenge I have is on a granting application. I can't put that down. And when I also go out to the public and say, why did you select these things for which you wanted me to tax with? Putting what the data we have on our brains on the table is hard to do. So this just is a way to document and truth test what we think are the true assumptions, because it could come back different, right? And that's also a valuable data point. You know, I mean, it's true testing what we think are the conclusions.
Consideration should be done also about raising this. What that would create for us in our parks. Probably winery.
And that was the theory behind the B&O challenge.
Well, I know that. I was just.
So I think this is just the step to get to that. Right? Like this is the fact finding data points that you need to be able to make that as a statement to the public. Yes. No, the deliverables, you'll be adopting a full park swing. And that way, when you roll that out,
Bring it back to
Yeah, we could do that, or we could pass it out of here, but put it on the full agenda. Have a robust discussion. I don't see the value of a workshop personally, right? Either we say no, right? We don't need this piece, right? Or we say, yeah, we'll finance it, but I want to, for me, what I'm looking for is making sure we have this discussion we just had, right? With everybody so that the council's, I don't know, it's because this.
So just move to next week's full CDC items.
We're gonna approve it, have to go to full.
Right.
Okay, so
Well, but no, we're gonna have this discussion over again, right?
yeah, I'm not gonna put down yes or no on the box. I'm just gonna have it forwarded.
Sure, that would be awesome.
Yeah, that was helpful.
Yeah.
That way you guys aren't locked in there.
Are you available?
Yeah, I will be remote, but yes, I'll be.
Okay, good.
The 28th.
Yes, sir.
Getting your photo taken.
Yep.
Yeah,
Dress,
Yeah.
dress
Can't be in
nicely.
St. Louis.
Dress
Maybe I
nicely.
can be in St. Louis.
You,
I know you did. I
you'll
said I'd
be
be
close
here.
to me. I'll be in Kansas with that time.
Oh, it's suit and tie.
I was coordinating.
Next item is an ordinance, Andrew, with your MP.
Yes. For Agenda Bill 23-06, amendments to Bonney Lake Municipal Code 15.13 Stormwater Management or MPDS permit source control requirements. So this is in response to the city's Western Washington Phase 2 stormwater permit. Specifically, the source control component requires a program to prevent pollutants from existing development from discharging to the stormwater system. The program also requires adoption of an ordinance requiring source control language to implement the program. We had a professional services agreement with Parametrics authorized on August 23rd, 2022 to provide MPDS permit support services, including development of the source control ordinance. The ordinance was completed and a presentation of the ordinance was given at the Planning Commission on January 4th, 2023. Notice of public hearing was posted on January 6th, 2023. A public hearing was held on February 1st, 2023, and no comments were received. And the Planning Commission voted to recommend approval of the ordinance at the public hearing. And we also have our consultants here at the meeting today from Parametrics.
Good.
And they would like to present some slides on the source control program. So I'd like to introduce Paul Fent, Aaron Ferguson, and Ariana Frender from Parametrics. So Paul and Aaron, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Before you.
And share our screen. We have a few slides. Maybe you'd think the third time my screen sharing would go more smoothly.
It's amazing. It's ready.
Looks good.
Is it sharing? Cool.
Yep. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So, as was introduced, this is a permit requirement under the 2019 to 2024 MPDS Phase 2 permit, of which Bonney Lake holds. And this is a requirement to do a city implemented source control program that focuses on businesses. And the goal is to protect the city water quality and increase awareness, educate businesses on stormwater control actions. So the way it comes about is to do a series of percentage of the businesses that are on the inventory to be inspected at least once during some period of time during the permit, and then the city staff or in the inspection would work with the business owner in order to provide source controls or BMPs that would reduce pollutant contact with stormwater. In order to do this, you're required to have a code amendment to implement the program. And the inspections are required by ecology to start this year, and the code has to be in place before we can start those inspections. So the first thing you have to do is establish an inventory, and that's an inventory of the businesses within Bonney Lake that need to be inspected. This inventory is established based on codes, business type codes that are in the permit that are required to be in there in the inventory. There are other codes that are included that either businesses don't have codes, or the code numbers may not be clear which codes the businesses go under. And so that's part of the process of developing the inventory, is to identify if all the businesses have a code, what their codes are, is the code in the ecology list, and then does it belong in the inventory. And there's some discretion on non-coded businesses to be in or out of the inventory, which is, we've gone through and established what this inventory is. And again, the next thing is to adopt the ordinance that requires that source control BMP inspections occur, and that those inspections apply BMPs at businesses. And then the other part of the plan is having a mechanism to enforce the program, or enforce the inspections, and enforce actions and activities at the business sites. Next slide.
Right, and this is where I get to jump in. And I'm Erin Ferguson, and I helped draft the actual code language, so I'm going to get a little bit into the sort of nitty-gritty of the code amendment. This is an amendment to existing provisions related to stormwater management. It's not an entirely new thing, it just adds new pieces. So it's an amendment to Chapter 1513. The biggest initial piece is that it defines the creation of the source control inventory that Paul just described. Another component is actually codifying that requirement for best management practices. It also requires inspections and talks a little bit about those in the code. And it also talks about strategies to help encourage action rather than jumping straight to enforcement. However, enforcement is also a component of this change, is making sure that violation of this can be enforced. And it adopts the existing city enforcement mechanisms from Chapter 14-130 to have a consistent enforcement mechanism sort of across both the stormwater management code and other portions of the code. And then there are some other minor updates and corrections that you might see that are not substantive, but while we're making these changes, going ahead and fixing those at the same time.
So as we identified, for the first steps that you have to take are this inventory of businesses that need to be inspected. And then the second part is what we call the public outreach element, and that is to let the public know that this is happening, usually through something on your website, and then to prepare the materials that we would use to work with site owners and business owners and so on their sites to identify source control needs and to provide the source control best management practices. So this is the important part of this in the inspections, and what you're required to do in the by the permit is that you have to, based on the number of businesses that are on your inventory, that you have to do 20% of that number as in inspections in any year. And so if you have 100 sites, you need to do 20 inspections in a year. And those inspections can include repeat visits to sites, and that would be included in that. So you don't have to do 20% of the businesses, you have to just do 20% of the total number of businesses you have on your inventory. And then, of course, the main part is to coordinate with businesses and site owners, which would involve contacting them to notify them that you'll be coming to the site, providing them with advanced materials or referring them to the website that has materials on it, organizing a time that you would go and meet with them, go to the site, meet, do the inspection, have a conversation with them, identify practices that they could use and apply based on the information that we have available. And I should point out that the source of the information and the best management practices is the Pierce County Manual. That's where those materials are identified, and those types of best management practices that would be the limit of what would be required would be included. and then work with them and identify any corrective actions that you would recommend that they take. And then if there are corrective actions that are needed, to provide a follow-up on those sites to see how things are going. And I believe that is it for our explanation of the program, of the new code changes.
When did these changes take place and who authorized them?
The proposed, so the proposed changes to the ordinance
Yeah.
language,
Yeah,
we went to,
no. When did the new NPDS requirement? Because this is a new requirement for NPDS, right?
It was this year that the this new source control program was to be implemented. So it was actually this year is via our NPDS permit. And so this is basically what you're seeing is just the ordinance itself in order to establish the program. A lot of that administrative work we're doing right now in the background, but that was where the requirement came from.
Yeah, but okay, all right. So I guess I have more homework to do then because I didn't. What happens if we don't get an NPDS permit?
well, we'll always have it. It's
Well, if we
issued by
don't
the
do
state.
this, we won't have one, right?
Well, I think we'll always have it, but they'll
It's
just,
not like more busy work for the state. I don't understand why we have to do this.
Yeah.
And it's not, the next thing is, what's it gonna cost us to do all these inspections? I mean, she's going back out again. What's the benefit?
This was definitely a mandate that was placed upon us by the Department of Ecology, but we were required to do it to be in compliant with our actual permit.
And I think, Tom, you hit on one of the key issues here is how do we take this on? Because we're not adequately staffed in our stormwater
That's my
utility
first
right now.
thought.
Yeah, that's my whole thing. Is
And so at this point, what we have talked about doing is contracting it out and using ARPA funds to pay for it.
The ARPA funds aren't gonna be there in 2 years.
Yeah, true.
This is the gift that keeps on giving,
It's-
right?
it's the only gift-
20% inspection.
It's the only gift we got.
Every year, right?
So the
Because we're
approach
not
we're,
staffed.
yeah, thank you. So the approach we're taking right now is we know that we have to do this ordinance, does this be in compliance? As long as we can establish this and then start actually developing it, we're figuring out what it's going to take to do the program. Then we can come up with the costs and find resources. Right now, we have a lot of the public works staff actually doing this work. A lot of the code enforcement piece we'll be working with Jason on, but yes, we do need to look for the resources to do it, but it is a requirement for us.
And we got stuck with it at our level kind of thing. It's like, well, we'll just, do the county, because obviously a lot of this refers to the county. It's like, why do we have one type of thing?
Paul or Aaron, could you speak to how this came to be that phase 2 permittees have to do this? My understanding is that phase 1 has been doing this for quite some time. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. So I think that just the quick history on it that we're aware of is that every 5 years, this Bonney Lake operates what's called a municipal separated storm sewer system. So we call it an MS4. In order to operate that system and discharge the waters, state waters or surface waters, you have to have this permit. So Ecology issues this permit for communities that comply with or meet certain thresholds, usually population thresholds. And so you've exceeded that along with, I believe there's about 92 other phase 2 communities. And so every 5 years, the permit is renewed. So in 2019, the permit was renewed and it included this provision and gave you a schedule to implement this program. And the schedule identified 2023 as the time that you need to start the program, and it identified elements that need to be included in it in order to implement it. And then those items are, so now that's why this is up now to be implemented. It's a requirement of the 2019 to 2024 permit to do this program. Usually what happens is there are phase 1 communities, there are phase 2 communities. The phase 1s are City of Seattle, Tacoma, Snohomish County, Pierce County, King County, Clark County, and I think there's one more that I'm forgetting right now. And usually what they do is, they being Ecology, what they do is that they'll roll out a program for the phase 2s and see how it works out and tests out. And then normally, phase 1s, sorry. And then normally they'll say in the next permit round, they'll roll it out for the phase 2. So that's kind of what they've done here is that they have this business inspection program for the phase 1 communities. Now they're rolling it out in this 2019 to 2024 permit for the phase 2s.
And Paul, to speak to our council member's question regarding what happens if we don't do this, I'm assuming that's really, honestly, not even an option to not do it, because if we're going to discharge waters of the state, we have to have a permit. It's impossible for us not to discharge stormwater. So really the question is, respectfully, the question is not a question because it can't be done. We have to do this.
Yeah, just the real broadly, this is a federal requirement to have each of the MS4s, the municipal separated storm sewer systems, need a permit to discharge. And then the federal requirement is delegated to the states that accept the delegation. Washington is one of those states that accepted that delegation. So it's a part of the Clean Water Act, and it's delegated through to Ecology that passes it down to the phase twos. And so if you're not complying, then Ecology has I suspect the ability to enforce noncompliance, but the real threat and risk is you expose yourself to a citizen's lawsuit, and a citizen's lawsuit, or they can come and give notice that they will sue you, and they can come in and actually, for lack of a better way to describe it, perform the enforcement actions on behalf of Ecology.
Mm-hmm. So, does this add any value to what we're doing? Is this going to change anything we're doing other than just add stuff to the code and make us go bug businesses?
It costs more money.
It costs more money, create more work.
I guess it depends on how you define create value. I mean,
Does it keep water cleaner?
It does.
Okay, how does it do that?
By enforcing the best management practices at the local runoff and treating what it is that they're discharging so that pollutant isn't getting into the water.
So we actually have like empirical data that shows that that's like on those tier one that this sort of stuff had an effect.
I would imagine we ourselves, I don't know that we have anything right at the moment, but I would imagine that we can certainly supply data that shows that when these programs are implemented, yes, it cuts down on pollutants being discharged.
Just runoff we're talking about.
Stormwater runoff, correct. What's collected and
Some parking lots or roofs on buildings. So what's the benefit by doing this? It's just not going to change much, I wouldn't think.
I'm not sure I understand what.
Well, I understand what the benefit is. Runoff of parking lot unless they're putting.
I take 3 training classes a year at the company I work for. That tells me that if somebody spills their Coke in the parking lot, I got to go grab all of these filters, throw it over the things, go blow an air horn and say, we just had an environmental hazard thing. And we all take that training and we just go, we just charge the company time to take the training. And there's a whole bunch of work in there. And all of us know none of that helped, right? And so I'm a little jaded.
Well, I can't speak to the toxicity of Coke, but I can tell you that things like parking lots are considered, and vehicles obviously are on these surfaces. There's tend to spill stuff from time to time. All of those things have to be accounted for, and in this case, due to the Clean Water Act, we have to do what we're being told we have to do to prevent as much of that as possible from going into
Let me ask a more direct question, right? So, C.3 was changed to include spas. Section 415.13.80, Section C, paragraph 3 was changed to add spas and hot tubs.
I'm taking a guess. I would
I'm
assume
not
they're talking
giggling,
about.
but I really wanted to giggle.
I would assume that they're talking about discharges that could have chlorine in them.
And I will speak to that because that's a change I made. And it was to be consistent with the language in the permit. That was an existing, and I'm sorry, it looks like maybe you're having a little trouble hearing me, so I'll try and project. But that change was made to make that language consistent with the language in the permit. All the rest of the existing language in your code was, and so it made sense to make all of it. So spas were missing. And so it isn't actually a new requirement there. That is one of those sort of minor corrections to make it consistent with existing language.
So we were talking about the inspections and stuff like that on this, and that's like fine and all, but to the other council members' point, what kind of testing is this appears to be kind of in. I'm going to look, but what is that? What's the point of that?
And I'm so sorry, I had a hard time hearing that, Paul. Could you hear that?
Inspection versus like any kind of measurement, right? We're gonna have to leave shortly, but sorry.
God, I just got
We're good. It's like
if I may, there is something important to point out, and it isn't right in the title of this. This is a source control inspection program. So it does not. Is not intended to apply to runoff from parking lots and runoff from roofs. That's a completely different part of it. Source inspection, source control means is there a pile of dirt sitting out on the lot? Is there are the dumpsters open and is there trash going into the basin? Is somebody washing grease fryer filters out into the parking lot that are raining into the drain? That's source. It is intended to focus on source control that's based on specific activities that add pollutants to stormwater that are not from routine areas like something that's just runoff from parking lots and rooftops and so on.
Well, do we have a list of those businesses that we're looking at and stuff?
As part of this work, they have created an inventory. Yeah.
Why wasn't childcare and that inventory? That was another question. Why isn't childcare on there? Is that part of education?
I don't have a lot of insight into why ecology added something to it or not, and so we were just following what the list was. The other thing that's important to point out is that if somebody has a complaint, they can on other activities that aren't on the list, then you are required based on the complaint to do the inspection on that site. But there's one other part in here that's more in the process that isn't something that's in the ordinance, and that is that you'll go and do the inspection if there is no contact with stormwater with an activity, a pollution generating activity. That business can get an inspection that is a no contact inspection, and then you don't have to go out. You don't have to do any best management practices, and you don't have to go back and inspect them again. So that there is a part of the process in the inspections that's intended to address if there isn't contact of stormwater with potential pollutants. But if it's on the list, on the activity list that ecology has, there's really not a lot of choice to not have it on there.
So is this super urgent? Can we bring this back to another CDC?
I believe there is a timeline associated with it, but I'm guessing we're not going to get a consensus on this tonight. So perhaps I would just throw out, perhaps this comes back to a workshop where there could be more discussion, or we could just bring it back here on the 7th.
I think we would probably like to point out that it is past due. The ordinance was supposed to be adopted in 2022. Key action now is that the inspection program needs to be implemented in 2023. So you're late on the adoption, on time on the inspections.
Yeah, and that's fine. And I think we're having major problems trying to figure out the value of it, basically, because an inspection is kind of cute, but that doesn't really necessarily talk about it later.
We could bring it back to the CDC.
We'll bring it back to the next CDC then.
Kind of help. It's kind of one of the things I was like worried about.
Just let us know what you want us to bring.
Minutes good?
Minutes are good. Minutes are good.
Minutes are good.
Good job, Aaron. Thank you. We have to run to council, but we'll be revisiting this with you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talking about the state, right? They want to spend the money, but what's the benefit? The cost.